My cheek was still burning when I smiled. I know how that sounds. A human diplomat standing in the grand conclave hall of the Yveth Dominion, 30 alien species watching from their carved obsidian seats, and I was smiling after being struck across the face by the most powerful political figure in the known galaxy. It probably looked insane. Maybe it was. But I had planned for this moment for 8 months, and I was not about to waste it by crying. Let me tell you how we got here. Humanity arrived at the galactic conclave 40 years late. Not because we were slow, not because we weren't ready. We were late because nobody sent us an invitation, and for 4 decades, we kept knocking on a door that kept not opening. The older species had a process, they said, a review period, stability assessments, cultural compatibility evaluations. It was all very official, and it all meant the same thing. We were not wanted, and they were hoping we would eventually get the message and go away. We did not get the message. My mother was an engineer on one of 3 human colonies that existed in legal limbo for 11 years. Real people, real homes. Real children born under foreign stars, growing up without galactic citizenship because the paperwork hadn't been approved. I used to ask her if she was angry about it. She would look up from whatever she was fixing, my mother was always fixing something, and say, "Angry doesn't build anything, Sarah. Figure out the problem and solve it." I became a diplomat because of her. I became a very particular kind of diplomat because of what happened to those colonies. We finally got into the conclave not because anyone opened the door for us. We got in because a single, unarmed human ship docked at Conclave Station and filed the paperwork anyway. No weapons, no threats, just a very patient crew and 700 pages of correctly formatted documents submitted in 17 official conclave languages. The station administrators didn't quite know what to do with that, and by the time the older species figured out a polite way to say no, we were already technically members. That was 20 years ago. In the time since, humanity had built trade relationships, signed 12 bilateral treaties, and quietly made ourselves useful enough that outright ejection became politically complicated. We were in. But being in, and being treated fairly, are 2 very different things. The Yveth Dominion controls most of the major trade routes in this part of the galaxy. Not all of them, but enough that their goodwill is worth more than almost anything else a species can have out here. For 3 years, they had been using a legal clause called Territorial Echo Doctrine to block human colony ships from reaching the 3 systems we had legally settled before the doctrine even existed. Every time we filed a challenge, it got buried. Every time we sent a delegation, they sent it back. Every time I requested a formal hearing, High Arbiter Cosrell found a scheduling conflict. He had run out of scheduling conflicts 2 weeks ago, and I had finally been standing in that hall for 4 hours, walking his delegation through exactly why their legal argument was built on nothing. I should describe the hall so you understand what it felt like to stand in it. The Grand Conclave Hall is carved from the interior of a collapsed star fragment. The walls are this deep, impossible black that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. The ceiling is 200 feet above you, and the delegations are seated on curved tiers that rise up on all sides, so that whoever stands at the speaking floor feels, very deliberately, like they are standing at the bottom of a well. The acoustics are perfect. Every word you say reaches every ear in the room with equal clarity. There is nowhere to whisper in that hall. There is nowhere to hide. Cosrell had made me stand there for 4 hours. He had interrupted me 17 times. His delegation had submitted 6 procedural challenges designed purely to slow me down. And through all of it, I had kept speaking, in perfect formal Yveth dialect, without notes, without losing my place, and without raising my voice once. I could see it frustrating him. The Yveth communicate dominance through physical behavior, posture, color, movement. Cosrell had been displaying escalating authority signals for 2 hours, and I had been pretending not to notice, which in Yveth social language is one of the most cutting things you can do to someone of his rank. To ignore a dominance display is to say, without words, that you do not consider it relevant, that you do not consider him relevant. So he walked down from his seat, crossed the speaking floor, and slapped me. In human terms, it was humiliating. It was meant to be. In Yveth terms, it was a formal dismissal. A physical statement that the conversation was beneath response, that I was beneath response, and that anything I said from this moment forward would be treated as the noise of something unimportant. Every species in that room went completely still. They were all doing the same calculation. A human diplomat has just been struck. How does the human respond? Do they get angry? Do they fall apart? Do they demand an apology? Whatever happened in the next 30 seconds would be recorded, studied, and repeated in diplomatic training courses for the next 50 years. I knew that. I had known it was coming. I had known it was coming because I had read everything ever written about Cosrell's negotiating history, and this was what he did when he was losing and couldn't afford to admit it. I let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to be deliberate, short enough to seem relaxed. Then I touched my cheek, looked at my fingers, looked back at him, and smiled, and I said, in perfect Yveth, in the sentence structure that implies absolute social superiority, in the tone that his own culture reserves for an elder addressing a child who has made a small mistake. Arbiter, sit down, we are not finished. The sound that went through that chamber was not quite a gasp. Different species express shock differently, but the collective intake of whatever various beings used to breathe was unmistakable. Cosrell's full threat display activated. Chromatophores across his neck and shoulders flared in cascading patterns of deep violet and amber. He drew himself up to his full height, which was considerable. His secondary arms spread wide. In Yveth cultural history, this display had preceded the collapse of 3 different diplomatic relations, and, according to one account I had found in a very old archive, the immediate surrender of a small trading government that had simply decided it wasn't worth the trouble. I opened my datapad. I'd like to enter the following into the conclave record, I said, still in formal Yveth, still in that tone, while he loomed over me doing the most impressive threat display I had ever seen in person. The territorial echo doctrine, as invoked by the Yveth Dominion against human colonial registration filings, carries a renewal requirement under Conclave Statute 7, Article 19. The most recent renewal occurred 211 standard cycles ago. The doctrine lapsed. Every invocation made against our filings in the past 3 years has been made under a statute that no longer legally exists. I pressed a button, and the document filed itself into the official conclave record in real time. Every screen in the hall displayed the timestamp. There was no taking it back. It was there forever. Cosrell's display slowed slightly. Not much, but slightly. I kept going. I would also like to note for the record, I said, that the 3 systems currently under disputed access are not economically significant to the Yveth Dominion at the territorial level. However, they are significant at the personal level to certain members of this delegation. I read aloud, still quietly, still calmly, from a set of financial documents that had taken my research team 4 months to legally obtain. Private extraction contracts, registered through a shell company, tied by 3 ownership layers to a family name that was Cosrell's mother's name before her marriage. He had not been blocking our colonies for the Dominion. He had been blocking them for himself. I did not call him corrupt. I did not use that word or any word like it. I simply read the documents aloud. The numbers spoke, the dates spoke, the names spoke. Every representative in that room, from 30 different species, heard it and understood it, in whatever way their culture processes the concept of someone being caught doing something they should not have been doing. Cosrell's display had gone completely still. Finally, I said, I would like to present a proposed treaty for consideration. I sent the document to every delegation's screen simultaneously. It had been pre-reviewed. It had been quietly co-signed by 7 conclave species over the past 3 weeks, in conversations held in corridors and over meals, and in small rooms where nothing was officially happening. I had been building this for 8 months. Every dinner I had attended, every favor I had done, every small act of remembering someone's name, someone's cultural calendar, someone's preference in how they like to be addressed. It had all been in service of this document, sitting in these inboxes, at this exact moment. The treaty offered the Yveth Dominion a joint development arrangement in 4 separate systems where their territorial claims were genuinely strong, in exchange for immediate clearance of the 3 human colonial routes. The economic return was better than what Cosrell had been protecting, significantly better. It was an offer that made saying yes easier than saying no, and it was structured so that rejecting it would require the Yveth delegation to explain to their own government why they had turned down a better deal. I looked up at him. He was still standing in front of me. The display had faded. He looked, if I'm being honest, like someone who had just realized that the entire floor of the room they were standing in had been made of glass, and they had been too busy trying to look tall to notice. "I think we can finish this today," I said. "If you'd like." He sat down. The vote on the treaty took 11 minutes. The Aveth delegation conferred in low voices, ran the numbers twice, and voted yes. 7 pre-signed species confirmed their support. 4 more joined when they saw which way it was going. The treaty passed with more support than I had even hoped for. The conclave secretary stamped the record. The colonial routes cleared. Not in days, not pending review. Cleared. Effective immediately. Because that was what the treaty said. And the treaty was now law. I shook hands with 4 ambassadors, bowed to 3 more, made a gesture that I had spent 2 weeks learning specifically for the Thressi delegation, because they only accept gratitude in a very particular physical form, and then I walked back to my diplomatic quarters, which were small and cold, and smelled faintly like the mineral used to seal the station's ventilation system. I sat on the edge of the bed. I pressed a cold pack to my cheek. It still hurt. I had known it would. I had known everything that was going to happen from the moment I walked into that hall. Almost everything. I had not known exactly how hard he would hit. That part had surprised me slightly. I thought about my mother. I thought about the colony where she had raised me, and the years when we weren't sure if the colony would be allowed to keep existing, and the way she used to look up at the stars at night, with an expression that I was too young to read then, but understood now. It was not anger. It was patience, with a very long fuse. I thought about the kids who were born on those 3 blocked systems, the ones who had been waiting for 3 years to have their home officially recognized. They would find out tomorrow morning, in whatever morning meant on whatever world they lived on, that the routes were open, that they were real, that the galaxy had looked at them and, maybe for the first time, said, "Yes, you count." That thought was the thing that finally made my throat tight. Not the slap, not the 4 hours of procedural obstruction, not the threat display, or the hall, or the 30 pairs of alien eyes calculating what humans were made of. Just the kids. Just the ordinary, unremarkable, ordinary miracle of people being allowed to live where they had built their lives. I closed my eyes. Outside, 3 routes opened. Ships began to move. Somewhere, somebody who had been waiting for a long time stopped waiting. And I will never meet them, and that's completely fine. The cold pack did not help much with the bruise. My mother would have said that was predictable, and I should have brought 2. She would have been right.